Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because, well, we are breaking down a brand new maximum severity vulnerability. If you work at IT, if you manage cloud infrastructure, or honestly, if you just want to understand the nuts and bolts of a massive cybersecurity event, you are definitely in the right place. Today, we're putting Cisco Secure Workload under the microscope to unpack a pretty nasty flaw designated as CVE 2026-2023. We're going to look at the cold, hard facts straight from Cisco's own security advisory, and then we'll zoom out to analyze the broader industry context using some recent reporting from the Register.
Okay, let's dive into this. Because a 10.0 on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, or CVSS, is universally recognized in the IT world as an absolute nightmare. I mean, it's literally the highest possible score a software bug can get. It is a 5-alarm fire, folks. It signifies a vulnerability that is trivial to exploit, requires absolutely zero privileges to execute, and causes catastrophic damage to a system's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Basically, when a vendor publishes a 10.0 advisory, it means every single other thing on an administrator's desk just gets immediately pushed aside.
So to understand exactly why this specific bug is causing such massive shockwaves, here's our agenda for today. First, we'll cover the perfect 10 vulnerability itself. Second, how the exploit actually works. Third, the cross-tenant danger. Fourth, fixing the flaw. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at Cisco's recent security streak.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the perfect 10 vulnerability.
According to Cisco's official advisory, the affected software here is the Cisco Secure Workload Cluster software. But, what's really critical to note is the scope of the environments affected. This isn't just a headache for companies hosting their own dusty servers in a basement somewhere. No, the vulnerability exists across both SaaS, meaning cloud-hosted deployments, as well as your traditional on-premises setups. So regardless of the specific device configuration you've got running, if you are using the affected software versions, this vulnerability is unfortunately present in your environment.
Moving on to Section 2. How the exploit works.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the sharp contrast between the safe components and the vulnerable ones. Cisco's advisory explicitly states that the web-based management interface, the dashboard that administrators actually log into every single day, is totally fine. It's not affected by this bug at all. Instead, the flaw lives completely out of sight in the internal REST APIs. If you're not super familiar, an API is basically the hidden messaging system that lets different parts of the software talk to each other. The big issue here is that these specific internal APIs suffer from some really weak validation and insufficient authentication checks. They essentially leave the backdoor wide open, blindly trusting requests that they absolutely should be double-checking.
And this brilliantly illustrates the terrifying simplicity of a zero-click, unauthenticated exploit. The attack path is just dangerously short. Step 1, the attacker simply sends a specially crafted API request to that vulnerable endpoint over the network. Step 2, because of those insufficient checks we literally just talked about, the API bypasses the normal validation process. And step 3, boom, the attacker immediately gains full access. They don't need to steal a password, they don't need to trick a user into clicking some sketchy phishing link. It requires zero user interaction and absolutely no prior credentials.
But, we should probably ask, what does full access actually mean in this specific context? Well, when that crafted API request succeeds, the attacker isn't just dropped into some low-level standard user account. Nope, they are instantly granted the privileges of the site admin role. And let me tell you, this is the ultimate prize for a threat actor. A site admin can read highly sensitive internal information, and even more importantly, they have the power to make sweeping system-wide configuration changes. They effectively hold the keys to the entire kingdom.
Which brings us to Section 3, the cross-tenant danger.
Reading through the Cisco advisory, there's a specific phrase that makes infrastructure managers just freeze in their tracks, and that is across tenant boundaries. So let's translate that jargon for a second. In cloud computing, multi-tenant basically means multiple different companies or tenants are sharing the exact same underlying hardware and software infrastructure. But their data and configurations are supposed to be strictly locked away from one another in these invisible digital silos. Well, what this 10.0 bug allows an attacker to do is completely smash through those silos. An attacker who compromises the system can make changes that bleed across those boundaries. That means they can alter configurations in entirely separate customer environments that just happen to share the cluster. To validate exactly why multi-tenant cloud customers are so incredibly nervous about this, the Register recently wrote that cross-tenant bugs, quote, undermine one of the core assumptions of multi-tenant infrastructure, namely that somebody else's compromise is not supposed to become your problem. And wow, that perfectly encapsulates the fear here, doesn't it? You could be doing everything right. You could be following every single security best practice perfectly in your own little slice of the cloud. But because of this underlying API flaw, a vulnerability exploited in someone else's tenant space could instantly become your massive disaster.
Okay, let's talk solutions in Section 4, fixing the flaw.
I need to make this absolutely crystal clear, with all the authoritative urgency I can muster. There are 0 temporary workarounds or mitigations available for this vulnerability. None. You cannot just tweak a firewall rule or flip a configuration switch to buy yourself some time while you plan a weekend maintenance window. The one and only way to fully remediate this threat and protect your environment is to install the fixed software releases provided by Cisco.
So the crucial point is knowing your specific upgrade path. If you're currently running Secure Workload Release 4.0, your first fixed release is version 4.0.3.17. If you're on Release 3.10, you're going to need to update to version 3.10.8.3. Now, if you're running an older version, so Release 3.9 or earlier, there actually isn't a direct patch for you to apply. You're instructed to migrate entirely to one of those supported fixed releases.
There is, however, some good news here if you happen to be utilizing the cloud-hosted version. As we noted earlier, the vulnerability absolutely did affect SaaS environments, but Cisco has officially confirmed that all cloud-hosted SaaS deployments of Secure Workload have already been patched on their end. So if you're a SaaS user, take a breath. No action is required on your part to fix this specific API flaw because Cisco has already handled the remediation for those environments.
Let's zoom out a bit for our final segment, Section 5, Cisco's recent security streak.
Just impartially reporting on the broader industry context provided by the Register, a pretty clear timeline starts to emerge. Over the past year, Cisco has been actively dealing with a string of really top-scoring vulnerabilities, and we're talking 9.8 severity and above, across a pretty wide variety of their enterprise infrastructure. We've seen it here: firewalls, identity systems, and various networking gear. In fact, just last week, they disclosed a maximum severity flaw affecting their SD-WAN systems that allowed attackers to grant themselves administrator privileges. And, well, that brings us right to today, with the disclosure of this 10.0 secure workload flaw.
To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with a highly provocative observation from the Register's reporting. Looking at that entire timeline of critical bugs, they wrote that Cisco seems to be treating 10.0 CVSS scores as a recurring feature rather than a special occasion. It's a really striking thought, and it begs a massive question for all of us. As our digital infrastructure becomes increasingly complex and interwoven, are these maximum severity alerts just the new normal that we have to learn to live with? It certainly highlights exactly why staying vigilant, understanding the mechanics of these flaws, and executing rapid patching cycles in your own environments has literally never been more vital. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this complex topic, and keep learning.